Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. We start in the name of Allah Azza wa Jal, the most merciful, the all-merciful, the universally merciful, and the intimately, the particularly merciful. Allah Azza wa Jal reminds us in every single one of our actions, before we start that action, that we start with the Bismillah. كل أمر ذي بال لا يبدأ بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فهو أقطع فهو أبتر فهو أجذع. There's several narrations of this saying that is ascribed to the Prophet ﷺ. It's narrated that the Prophet ﷺ said that every matter that doesn't start with the name of Allah and Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, then it's cut off from blessings. That is cut off from barakah. Barakah is when Allah puts a lot of result in a little bit of a cause. That one cause comes with much effect. That's barakah. And the believer, the mu'min, the person who submits to Allah is a person of barakah, is a person who brings about that barakah. And so, in that regard, every action of the believer reminds one of Allah Azza wa Jal, who is the merciful. That Allah Azza wa Jal sent His Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and He sent him as a mercy to mankind when He says, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. We've only sent you as a mercy to all realms. And to be prophetic, to follow that uswatun hasana, to follow that model of conduct Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam necessitates that we be ambassadors of mercy. That people see us as sources of mercy. That we become people who have that godly characteristic of having mercy for the other. But before we can begin to have mercy for the other, we must begin with mercy for ourselves. To have mercy for the self before you have mercy for the other, because Allah Azza wa Jal first charges us with our own selves before He charges us and entrusts us with the responsibility we have to others. This, of course, doesn't relieve us of our responsibility we have to others, but first we must focus on being mercies to ourselves. And what does that mean? Does that mean that when somebody inconveniences us that we disregard them? That's not what we mean by being a mercy to ourselves. Primarily, being a mercy to ourselves is allow ourselves to attain mercy. When somebody asked the Prophet ﷺ that, Ya Rasulullah ﷺ, I want your company in paradise. His response was what? A'inuni bikathati sujud. That help me with this through much sajda. And sajda here, he said sajda, but what's meant by that is the prayer. That he mentioned the most important part of the prayer, the sajda. And that's the point when the mind is lower than the heart. The head is lower than the chest. Where the heart rises above the mind. And we're remembered that our affair is the affair of the heart. Mercy doesn't necessarily always come from the intellect. If we were purely rational about all of our interactions, we would first aim for that which is best for ourselves. Why would we do good to another? Why would I give charity when I can keep that for myself? But Allah Azza wa Jalla reminds us that the heart takes precedence. And to be people of mercy, that heart, we must take care of that heart. To be people of mercy, we must enact on deeds that Allah commands. That we must be people whose salah, whose prayer truly tanha anil fahsha'i wal munkar, truly forbids one from fahsha and munkar, things that are despicable, things that the heart can't settle on. That lying, the heart can't settle on lying. Backbiting, the heart can't settle on backbiting. Something in the heart feels wrong when we say something about another that's not true, or even if it's true that if they don't want us to say it, the heart doesn't settle. There's that guilt that Allah puts. That guilt Allah puts in the heart is from His mercy unto us. That guilt He puts into our heart is a reminder, that's a sign of Iman. That if we did something wrong and we feel bad about it after we do that action, that's a sign of Iman. That's a sign of faith. That's a sign that Allah has kept you cognizant of Him Azza wa Jal. That I've done this thing wrong, but regardless of that fact, I've kept you at the forefront, Ya Allah. That I've shown myself mercy to myself by not putting myself in a place where you look at me, Ya Allah, and you look at me with disgrace. And you look at me as somebody who deserves the punishment. So we begin with having mercy with ourselves by first enacting on those deeds, those fara'id, that Allah asked us to do. That's that first mercy we enact on ourselves. And then to avoid those acts that prevent us from receiving Allah's grace, from receiving Allah's mercy. Those acts that when you do it, it displeases Allah. That when you see the Messenger ﷺ on the mahshar, when everyone is raised, that you're ashamed to look at the Prophet ﷺ with those acts. That's that second mercy. To divest yourself of those acts, to remove those acts from your life, to make tawbah, to properly turn back to Allah Azza wa Jal. That's that second mercy that you have to yourself, so that you do not prevent yourself from the khair, the good that Allah has stored for you. And then the third manner in which we can have mercy for ourselves is to have gratitude for what Allah has given us. That each breath you take is something being taken from your stock, from your inventory. When you lose something, that's when you truly have gratitude for it. You recognize its worth. And each moment we're losing a breath. And we have to recognize the worth of that breath. That breath that you take, if it's not spent in the pleasure of Allah Azza wa Jal, in your ibadat, in your worship, or your adat, your habitual acts, or your mu'amalat, your social interactions, if those aren't oriented towards Allah, those breaths are not oriented towards Allah, then we are wasting that breath. To have shukr for that breath. That, Ya Allah, you gave me this breath for your obedience. You didn't give it to me to disobey. Ya Allah, that you gave me this time that I have and I recognize it's going, so I recognize its worth. Before it goes, Ya Allah, I want to have shukr for this breath. That I want to use these breaths, this energy that you give me, for your pleasure. That I don't use this breath to talk about so-and-so and what they did wrong. I'm more worried about having mercy unto myself. What am I doing wrong that I can solve in myself? That I can fix, I can rectify that affair in myself. That I'm too busy, that we are too busy to be preoccupied with the other, because we're first worried about having that mercy to our own selves, that not preventing ourselves from the mercy that Allah has in store for us. And so each breath that goes, we recognize that that breath is being taken and that we are ambassadors of mercy to ourselves first and then to the other. And once you are able to fulfill the fara'id, of course this does not disregard any of the obligations we have on another. That we can't use the excuse of I am showing mercy to myself, therefore I'm not worried about my brother or my sister doing such and such wrong action, that I can assist with them. I can assist them with that action by removing that action from their lives in whatever capacity I have. If they are in my circle of influence, then I can use that circle of influence to remove them from the action that they're in. That's a fard on us, right? With wisdom, of course. We don't want to be people who do tanfir, who drive people away from Allah Azza wa Jalla and His Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. We want to be people of tabshir, people who bring Him closer. Bashiru wa la tunaffiru, the Prophet said, that give people glad tidings and don't drive them away. And once we fulfill this act of mercy unto ourselves, then we can worry about our immediate family past the obligations. And each of us have obligations to our immediate family in regards to encouraging them to do good and to do good and to prevent them from doing things that are harmful to themselves. And it is harmful to themselves and harmful to ourselves when we disobey Allah Azza wa Jal. And it's from the mercy of Allah Azza wa Jal that He prevents us from that harm for ourselves. When He says, Ya ibadiya alladhina asrafu ala anfusihim la taqnatu min rahmatillah. That, oh, my slaves who have transgressed upon themselves, we're not harming Allah an iota by one of our acts of disobedience, nor are we benefiting Him one bit with our acts of obedience. It's purely for our own benefit. And so we should be people who recognize the mercy that Allah Azza wa Jalla has given us in that benefit, in giving us that guide and not leaving us to our own devices. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين يقوم استغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. If we feel like we've spent many breaths in waste, then we recognize that there is a goal to reach, that we aren't necessarily perfect. And in that regard, Allah has given us a solution, that every single act that we do is going to have deficiencies. That doesn't relieve us of doing the fara'id, that we don't despair in the fact that those acts have deficiencies. We have hope in the fact that our actions have deficiencies, yet Allah still accepts them. That these actions that we do, they're not worth much in front of Allah Azza wa Jal. But regardless of that fact, Allah buys back those acts for a price higher than their worth when He is the one who owns the acts in the first place. He buys back His own property for what it's worth, for more than what it's worth. That's the mercy of Allah Azza wa Jal. And if we haven't had the opportunity to do much acts, Allah Azza wa Jal has given us a means of increasing that barakah in our time, the barakah in our acts, the blessing in our acts, so that we can produce a lot out of a little. And it's one of the khasa'is of the Prophet ﷺ mentioned in the Quran, that Allah and His angels send their blessings and salutations upon Him ﷺ, and that we're asked to do the same. So when we do that act of salawat on Him ﷺ, that what are we doing? We say, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Oh Allah, send your blessings on the Prophet ﷺ. And then what happens? That Allah sends back 10 blessings back upon us. And us sending that blessing to Him ﷺ is not worth much, because it's deficient. Which is why we ask Allah to send it, and Allah's salawat is infinite. The worth of that is infinite. And then 10 come back to you. So that whatever holes and gaps we have in our actions, those are filled by salawat on Him ﷺ, and that consistent reminder that we are part of the ummah, of the greatest of creation, the beloved of Allah Azza wa Jal, that it's from His love Azza wa Jal for His Prophet ﷺ that He has given us this ability to patch up these deficient acts with a means that doesn't take too much energy. This is from His khasa'is. This is from His particularities, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that wasn't given to other anbiya, wasn't given to other prophets. So we ask Allah Azza wa Jalla, He makes us people of barakah, that He makes us people of makes us ambassadors of mercy, first to ourselves and then to others. We ask Allah Azza wa Jalla that we keep in mind the rights of Allah Azza wa Jalla, and then the rights of ourselves, and then the rights of others. We ask Allah, He doesn't deny us of His mercy. We ask Allah Azza wa Jalla, He puts barakah in our time, barakah in our acts, blessings in our time, and blessing in our acts, and He doesn't deny us of that blessing. We ask Allah Azza wa Jalla that when we meet Him, we're not ashamed of the acts that we have. We ask Allah Azza wa Jalla that when we meet the Prophet ﷺ on the mahshar, that when we meet Him sallallahu alaihi wasallam at the hawd, at His basin, that He looks at us smiling, proud of the actions of His ummah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that we be people who truly manifest what it means to be part of this ummah, to be kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat linnas, the best of people who have ever come out, the best of nations who have ever come out to people. May Allah Azza wa Jal make us the best of people. May Allah Azza wa Jal patch the faults that we have in our actions. May Allah multiply our words beyond what it's worth. May Allah Azza wa Jal not take us into account for our slips and our misdeeds. May Allah Azza wa Jal multiply our good and replace our evil deeds with good deeds. May Allah Azza wa Jal allow us to be people who have our evil deeds replaced with good deeds. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal that He be the only source of solace for us in our lives. He be the only source of salam. So we say, Allahumma anta salam. ومنك السلام تباركت يا ذا الجلال والإكرام حينا وادخلنا دار السلام ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما. We ask Allah Azza wa Jalla to have mercy on our teachers, particularly our first teachers, our parents. So we say رب ارحمهما كما ربياني صغيرا 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 رب ارحمهما كما ربياني صغيرا. Ya Allah, have mercy on them as they had mercy on us when we were young. We ask Allah Azza wa Jalla to allow us to recognize that Allah and His angels send the benedictions and salutations upon Him sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we're asked to do the same. Inna Allah wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala nabi ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima. Allahumma salli ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali sayyidina Muhammad wa ala azwaji sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ashabi sayyidina Muhammad wa ala atba'i sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ummati sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali sayyidina Muhammad wa sallim wa barik alayhi. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al-mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. اذكروا الله يذكركم. Remember Allah, He'll remember you. وادعوه يستجب لكم. Call upon Him, He'll answer you. ولذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون. وأنت يا أخي أقم الصلاة.